Hello. Welcome back. Episode 12, Season 2, Watching Privacy. We got our all-star Brent, as always, and Annika joining us for a little bit of a farewell, I would say. No Raju, obviously, but Annika's going to be leaving us, and she's going to hopefully go out with a little bit of a bang with some lovely, inspiring stories on our way out, I'm sure.
Go out with a rant. We'd love to have a rant for you to go out on. So.
I'm not going to lose, so you can really rant about whatever.
Yeah,
we're live, so it doesn't really matter.
Very good. Thanks for having me on, y'all.
So let's dive in. I think we got a good amount of interesting stuff. Let's see what's first up. Our friends over at Twitter apologizes for personal data misuse with the timeline alert. So I saw this, I think, earlier this morning or yesterday, one of the two. I think it was yesterday. And like if you scroll to the top of your Twitter timeline, there was like a little bit of a kind of like a message that they put at the top, kind of on the right side of the screen here. It says Twitter's use of your personal information for tailored advertising. And we talked about this a little while ago. I think last season they got caught for it. And then finally, I guess whatever settlement happened ended up clearing out. So basically, Twitter was using your phone number and your email for advertising purposes when they said that they were collecting it for additional security for your account. I know Facebook got in trouble for this a while ago too. I think it's probably a lot more common practice than we think, but generally just kind of goes to show that, like, you know, anytime you see one of those privacy policy update emails or notifications, it's almost always a red flag, because chances are the policy is not getting better for you. It's getting better for the vendor. And so just right off the bat, you know, it's a bad sign. But yeah, I mean, there's a different level of wouldn't even call it shadiness. I'd call it maybe nefariousness of taking someone's phone number and email that you know you're being used for security purposes, and then some genius engineer or product manager or somebody was like, you know what's a great idea? Let's just use that same information and use it for advertising instead. Did you guys see anything else different of the stories or other stories that were related to it, or pretty on point, I guess?
It really felt like Twitter felt left out of our watching privacy weekly discussions, because Facebook is getting all the attention and all the other ones, and it just felt like, they're all, let's face it, they're all doing this kind of stuff. It's you collect it and you say it's for certain purposes, but it's still data, and it's still something that they're addicted to, and there's still something that has a value that somebody else is willing to pay for it. And so, they're not the only ones. We know we've seen this before. It's just that maybe now there's just more light being brought to these kind of things taking place. But they had to come forward. Let's see how things go afterwards. The temptation is still there. We'll see. I don't know if this is I don't think this is something that's some out of the ordinary deal. This is something that is very ordinary. It's just getting more light brought to it every week.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Tejas. Like, who are the watchdogs for this? It says that Twitter reached a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission. So is there like a watchdog organization with the FTC that's like, hey, you're misusing this user data for a purpose that you didn't explicitly state?
I'm not sure. I guess someone has to bring it to FTC's attention. So it must be some organization that's doing it. So I'm not even, the article that I saw didn't really have anything about the actual source for it. I mean, it seems pretty easy to make a law that basically says when you collect information for security purposes, it can't be used for anything but security purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one even interesting thing towards the tail end of the article, which is, I think, what every company kind of uses as a cop-out. It says, Twitter also mentioned that users' phone numbers and email addresses were not shared with advertisers, and that users don't need to do anything with respect to this issue. And like, people always say Facebook sells information, Twitter sells information, Google sells information, but like all of these big companies, no one is in the business of selling information. It's all about aggregating information and letting people use the information you collect. So even if they say that, all right, we didn't sell your information or your phone number to anybody, but they used your phone number for targeted advertising, which means they use the area code, from a phone number alone, you can get a lot of information like, the carrier you're using, what city you're located in, and different attributes of the phone itself. Same thing with an email address. Obviously, you get provider information and things along those lines. And so it's a little just, it's like, you're being misleading because you know that the general public thinks you're selling information, and which is why the whole privacy thing kind of comes up. But it's really not about selling it at all. It's actually just hoarding and storing as much as you can so you can use it for your own use. I mean, there's no other really good reason to talk about it. But yeah, I think it would be a good thing, back to your point, Annika, just kind of figuring out where the source of the entire argument basically came from. So I mean, I tried clicking around and digging here too, but there wasn't really much there. So I mean, it says they paid in a blog post published on Wednesday. Twitter's chief privacy officer issued a statement regarding the settlement. Confirms Twitter paid $150 million US penalty as part of the settlement, and that's pretty much it. And so I mean, I don't know, maybe a better part of the settlement. First of all, the $150 million nobody sees. And so it's like your valuable data was given out for free and then a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Why don't they say, look, everybody who was affected will give you Twitter Blue for a month? Seems like a reasonable trade, equally valuable, maybe. Not that anybody would care, but like, it's a way for a company to actually show like some level of goodwill for maybe like earning people's trust back. But I think when you're in that kind of position, you know that you don't really have to do anything and it's all good.
I have a question.
What's Twitter Blue?
What is Twitter Blue? What's Twitter Blue?
Nobody really knows what Twitter Blue is.
Isn't that the premium edition of Twitter that Elon Musk is counting on? How many? 69 million people to subscribe to within the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah,
something like that, at $4 a month or something like that.
So you basically paid monthly subscription offers exclusive access to premium features that let you customize your Twitter experience. And those features are not really that great. So first of all, it doesn't remove advertising, which is just the dumbest part at all about paying a premium. And I think it gave you the access to like create what do you call you don't get check marks either, which is kind of a weird thing. And I think it was about spaces and like donations and kind of some aspects around there. But it just seems so easy. I mean, I don't know what these guys at Twitter do. I mean, there's a lot of people who could make Twitter Blue like a decent thing. Just get rid of advertisements. I think a lot of the things Musk has said about making Twitter Blue like an attractive product for people to pay $3 or whatever. I only see tweets from verified users or other Twitter Blue people, so I know they're real. Gets rid of a lot of the bots and kind of creates a little bit of a buffer there. There's ways that can make it a little bit more valuable, but yeah, Twitter Blue in its current standing is not really good. Actually, I just found this from their help document. Is Twitter Blue ad free? No. Currently, ads continue to fund our ability to innovate as we grow this new part of our business. Twitter Blue does include an ad-free articles feature, which offers subscribers a fast-loading, ad-free experience on the websites of publishers within the Twitter Blue publisher network. And so read more about ad-free articles here. And so, I mean,
you know what? At least with YouTube Premium, and you don't get ads.
Yeah, 100%. Doesn't really.
What is this?
I mean, Twitter Blue.
Is that worth $3 a month or $4? Not to me.
No.
Sorry, Elon.
Sorry, Mr. Musk.
Not his quite yet, but eventually. Oh, there's bookmark folders that you can use, an easy way to organize your saved content.
Wow.
Undo tweet, apparently. There's a reader mode for articles, which is, I don't know.
What's the difference between undo tweet and delete tweet?
I don't know. That's a good question.
One's $4.
Yeah,
That's $4. That's the difference.
It says undo tweet. Typo, forgot to tag someone. Preview and revise your tweet before it goes live. With undo tweet, you can set customizable timer for up to 30 seconds to click undo before the tweet, reply, or thread you've posted hits your timeline. Correct mistakes easily by previewing what your tweet would look like before the world can see it. I don't know. That just seems like a kind of standard feature to me, but
keeping my $4. Sorry.
I have a segue that I'm going to use into our next article, which is that sounds useless. So, but what doesn't sound useless is security for your daycare apps.
That was nice. That
Thank
was a
you.
very nice
I really
segue.
tried.
So the Electronic Frontier Foundation had this article up from I think Tuesday, and I mean I was a little confused when I read this in the first place. I didn't even know daycares had that many apps in the first place. Maybe because I don't have kids, I don't really realize maybe the technology going into daycare apps. But I mean, the article itself was it kind of blurred the lines between security and privacy. There was a lot of security issues, like a lack of like two-factor authentication and kind of the way images and stuff like that are stored. But there was also a lot of privacy aspects in terms of um, first of all, they had Facebook tracking pixels in their apps in the first place, which is, I think, probably the lowest hanging and easiest red flag for, um, having hardened or a lack of privacy initiatives, because you don't really need to do any kind of Facebook tracking pixels in a daycare app. Not really sure how it works for them or why they thought it was that important to include, but yeah, there was a lot of information out here, but it was mostly security related. What did you guys see that was different or anything else from here?
You know, it was mostly security. And it feels like there's still this urge to, when you say you're talking about privacy, it's really still more about security. And I don't know if it's done purposefully or not, but it feels like, and these are really important things here. It should go without even thinking that you make sure these apps are secure and are being used by the right people in the right way, in the appropriate way. And but then there's the privacy and the ethical use of information. I think maybe that's where things are, you know, kind of going a little bit off the rails when people talk about privacy. It's not about safeguarding in terms of just the technical aspects of safeguarding data. It's also the ethical use of how what you do with that data and who has access to it. And I think that's where these stories like, this and others, it's so important to make sure people are also not just thinking about, yeah, we're putting in the authentication and all these pieces, because we want to make sure the data is safe and secure, which of course that's the case, but it's also, how should we be using this data? Who should be able to look at it? What should they be able to do with it from an ethical standpoint, not just from a technical security standpoint? And
Yeah.
that's where some of these things some of the stuff gets lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob asked, what are some examples? And so in the article, it kind of dives into this one app called Tadpoles. Clever name. I'll give it to them. But basically, it sends all sorts of event-based activity over to Facebook for anytime an action happens within the application. And so another, I guess, a paragraph from the article says, in its privacy policy, they don't sell or rent this information, but the precise amount of data sent to them down to the CPU type of the device is highly granular, creating an extensive profile about the parent and guardian outside of the Tadpoles app. A profile that is subject to data sharing in situations like a merger or acquisition. Neither branch.io, which makes Tadpoles, or Facebook are listed or mentioned in Tadpoles privacy policy, which then kind of goes into just not being clear on your disclosures. And so Tadpoles was one of the, I guess, bigger offenses that this whole thing is kind of centered around. I didn't really see any other examples inside of here.
Yep.
Let me see. They also had a list of just suggested tasks, and like you both mentioned, this is more for security. So two-factor authentication available for all admin and staff. Address known security vulnerabilities address known security vulnerabilities in mobile apps. Disclose and list any trackers and analytics and how they're used. Use hardened cloud server images and lock down any public cloud buckets hosting children's videos and photos. That one I think would be maybe the most concerning to parents, and also just the one that would make the most sense to people who aren't as familiar with security and privacy and things like that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of what in those kind of those bullet points how it shouldn't be,
Mm,
or don't they
mhm.
have to have some, some statements about how this data will be used and why, in addition to, the things that, who shouldn't access it, what shouldn't be done with it? Do they need to start pointing out exactly how it's going to be used too? Because there's we've seen before the ability to be very nebulous in these data policies allows for a lot of shenanigans to go on. And if there was something that was a little bit more concrete, not only how it's not going to be used, and who's not going to be able to use it, but also how they really are going to use it, not and to be as specific as possible, because to me that's where there's a lot of loopholes and openings with this kind of nebulous approach to what they're doing with the data.
I think the point, Brent, is that they don't really know what they're doing with the data, so they just collect it, and then we'll figure out how to use it later.
Just like
Yeah,
Facebook,
it's
just like
just like
Facebook
this.
did, which
Yeah.
lucky for us, I'm really trying to get these segues, just like Facebook said.
She is going
Facebook
out with a
data,
bang here. This
yeah.
is great.
They also didn't know what they were doing with that data. They were just collecting it. And now the Department of Justice has a lawsuit that is challenging them, which is challenging algorithmic discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. Meta agrees to change its ad delivery system. This is a huge deal, I would say. Tejas, thoughts, opinions?
Did you know how huge the fine was?
How much was it?
We'll take a guess.
Probably not huge. But like
Um,
10 million.
10 million from Brent,
150 million.
150 million from Annika. I will tell you it was a nice round number of $115,000, $115,054 civil penalty, the highest allowed under the law. So 115 grand for that's not even a slap on the wrist, Brent. That's
It's like
more like
one finger,
at
that is
best.
awful.
It's kind of like the fan breezing against your hair at that point. 100 grand
If I only had hair
for
for it to breeze against, you're right.
That's why I
This
made
is
the
just
joke.
ridiculous. So there is no incentive for them to do anything right. I mean, if they can get away with all this and pay that, that's like digging in your sofa and change for some of these folks, for these companies. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, they
Bob
made it
is
seem
right
like it
on it.
was this big,
150K. That's
yeah, a
Bob is
big.
killing it.
I mean, this a U.S. attorney for Manhattan goes, because of this groundbreaking lawsuit, Meta will, for the first time, change its ad delivery system to address algorithmic discrimination. So we talked a little bit about discrimination and kind of the way these algorithms and targeting works a couple times before too. But this one also makes sense because they had this thing called what was it like? Groups or ads or
Cohorts?
special
Oh,
ad
cohorts.
audiences, yeah,
Yeah.
which are kind of like a cohort. And so that
Yeah.
special ad audience is what people did, and you can create a special ad audience based on either like your racial background or your income or your location or different attributes about you. And basically it's a way for like you to advertise people who might potentially be interested in your product. But obviously what was happening here is landlords or anybody who was trying to get people to rent stuff from them was targeting certain types of people and by nature excluding other types of people, which, I mean, seems like the whole thing could have been avoided very simply. I mean, something like housing, you would think at Facebook, with the amount of lawyers and people they have on the team, just be like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have these filters for advertising housing. That just seems like I don't know, like a very low hanging fruit. But I'm sure they made more than $115,000 in ad revenue from this thing, so I don't think
Yeah.
they're really too worried about it.
It's almost more, why would they spend their time and effort and resources on getting that right if they can just do what, operate as they normally do and pay this 100 and whatever it is $1,000 fine, which is nothing to them. That
Yeah,
doesn't
so
change their behavior at all.
here's the quote from the lawsuit as well, actually. So Meta enabled and encouraged advertisers to target their housing ads by relying on race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin to decide which Facebook users will be eligible and ineligible to receive housing ads. I mean, I don't know, call me crazy, but you would think housing ads might be based on income, probably not everything else. That just seems like a very kind of low level criteria for how you would create your cohorts. But basically, Meta created this ad targeting tool known as lookalike audiences or special ad audiences, kind of like the cohort thing. It uses machine learning algorithm to find Facebook users who share similarities with groups of individuals selected by an advertiser using several options provided by Facebook. Facebook has allowed its algorithm to consider FHA protected characteristics like race, religion, sex, stuff like that, in finding Facebook users who look alike the advertiser's source audience, thus are eligible to receive housing ads. And so I think translated, that basically means that whatever housing company is trying to run an ad campaign, you upload or select, the demographics you currently have or you're targeting, and then it'll find people adjacent to that. And it's not looking for really diversity at that point. It's kind of just sticking with what it's got. I think, I mean, obviously the 150 is pretty low, but this could be a big deal in terms of stopping this whole special ad audience aspect of it. And if it has a broader reaching scope than just this one specific example, and it starts eliminating this kind of I wouldn't say guilty by association, but kind of just associated through attributes that you didn't really ever disclose, could be a good thing. Hopefully, it expands and they use this as precedent or something to create some broader regulation around it. But for the time being, that's pretty much the gist of it. Not much else really there. But
I don't think shame on its own is enough of a deterrent
Mm.
to get these folks to actually, because if they're making money off it, they can live with the shame. Let's put it like that.
well,
I was just sorry I was so quiet. I was trying to remember that source. We talked about this. It was an article by the Markup called "The Secret Bias Hidden in Mortgage Approval Algorithms." So it's, I don't know, it's like one of those things where we're seeing the systemic issue that's kind of like under the current or whatever. And this is just like another tentacle of that, yeah, being perpetuated by tech. Yeah.
Kind of like that old facial recognition
Yes.
thing. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, wait a
There's
minute.
something about that.
Oh,
Oh, look at that.
look at that. That's our next topic. Great job, Brett. Great job.
uh,
So there's an article from The Verge this week, and the headline is "Microsoft to retire controversial facial recognition tool that claims to identify emotion." AI-powered emotion recognition has been criticized as unscientific, even by the people who are creating it. They can't really come to a consensus. So this decision is part of a larger overhaul of Microsoft's AI ethics policies. The company's updated responsible AI standards, first outlined in 2019, emphasize accountability to find out who uses its services and wants to have greater human oversight into where these tools are applied.
I have a lot of respect for this from Microsoft. First of all, you notice the word ethical was actually in there. It wasn't kind of talking about privacy and then really talking about security. It's talking about the ethical use of this data, this facial recognition and technology, and it wasn't ready for prime time. And all the things that people were saying that it could do or couldn't do, or no, more like it could do, it just wasn't ready. And people were getting arrested, being harassed, and it just wasn't ready. And so I applaud Microsoft for this move. Maybe at some point, maybe never say never, but the fact that they're coming forward and saying, hey, we're gonna step away from this. It wasn't meeting our ethical guidelines or and what we felt was the correct use of this technology. I applaud that. I know we talk a lot about companies that aren't doing the right thing, and we just kind of outlined a couple of them. Well, give a shout out to companies that try something and it doesn't work, and they're willing to admit it, and at least walk away for the time being, and see what happens later on down the line.
Well, I mean, I would say on the counter side of that, so I mean, the system was already live and in place, and so it's like I don't know how you get your conscience after this is out and about, and then you outlined some ethical standards back in 2019, and then it took you 3 years to basically realize that I don't know, maybe tracking someone's facial or emotions based on their face is probably not the smartest idea. I would think that there should be you don't really need to be like an ethicist or some fancy person at one of these companies to figure it out. These guys make it seem like they're doing some groundbreaking work, and it's really just basic, like simple common sense. And so, like one of the quotes here from their chief responsible AI officer at Microsoft says, "We recognize that for AI systems to be trustworthy, they need to be appropriate solutions to the problems they are designed to solve." What do you call it? She added the company would retire its Azure services that infer emotional states and identity attributes such as gender, age, smile, facial hair, regular hair, and makeup from it. So, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like this is pretty low hanging fruit. And I mean, I guess you get pats on the back. Maybe the service wasn't selling very well. Maybe the service wasn't very good. Obviously, there's a PR spin happening here as well. So, I don't think this is all just kind of goodwill here. There's usually some problem with it, and maybe Clearview had a better system than Microsoft, and they weren't selling very well.
God.
Who knows what it is, but I mean, yeah, it just seems like some of these things are pretty simple. We already talked about the same thing from like voice prints, right? And we could infer a lot about someone from a voice print. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and this is kind of no different. I think maybe should be a little bit easier than a voice print, I would imagine, but just doesn't seem like it's that great of a thing. But it basically just says starting Tuesday, Microsoft said new customers will need to apply to use Azure's Face API, and returning customers are granted 1 year to reapply to continue using the software. So it's not even really shutting down per se. It's really just kind of scaling back maybe how much they're pushing it. So really, I guess not that great of a news, but something is better than nothing.
You're so hard. No, I think I'll take any good news we can get at this point. And you're right. I mean, look, was it IBM a couple of years ago shut it down? Their official, it was at least a year or two ago. And then I recall that Amazon put a pause on their facial recognition stuff for a while.
Mhm.
So, yeah, should it have happened sooner? Yeah, sure. Okay. But at least there's something that there's that word again that I came up with, that I saw, ethics. At least there is some attention and some, some focus on that. And, should it have been sooner? Yeah, it would have been great, but it's almost like, beggars can't be choosers at this point. We need some positives to hold on to, and a company like Microsoft, who is a driver of this stuff. It was a positive step, at least for me, to see at this particular time.
Yeah, to give Microsoft the benefit of the doubt here, in that Verge article, there's another quote here. So the principal group product manager for Azure AI, Sarah Bird, said tools such as emotion recognition can be valuable when used for a set of controlled accessibility scenarios. The tool has exciting potential in education, accessibility, and entertainment. But she notes that it's also easy to imagine how it could be used inappropriately to impersonate speakers and deceive listeners. I mean, common sense would tell you that, like, I still don't even know how you can say education, accessibility, and entertainment are like good uses, because someone's going to tell you that, you put up Microsoft Azure AI facial recognition into the Tadpole app, and yeah, maybe you'll find out if a kid is like happy or not, and then you can act accordingly. Some would say that's a good thing. Some would say that's a bad thing. I mean, you don't really know what the triggers are, and especially, I think the way Annika started off the entire story is the most important thing, where basically, like, the technical people say that this is not even like a credible way of calculating things. So it's all just a guess and a check. If you had some proof that this was legitimate, maybe I could see a little bit better of an angle here. But it's like you're kind of guessing and hoping. And I mean, on the flip side, nobody really asks where Microsoft got this data set from. You obviously have to analyze millions and millions or billions of photos, and somehow they've got not just images, but they have images tagged to an emotion and then fed that into their ML system, and then that's what's churning out, the reactions. But how did you get that, and how did that tagging happen? I feel like nobody really gets to the source of where these data sets are coming from.
Good point.
Yeah. Okay, hurry! Someone think of a good segue into our TikTok story.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking
about
of people
that?
making
There you go.
weird faces.
Yes. Speaking of, here's the segue. Here you go. Leaked audio from 80 internal TikTok meetings shows that US user data has been repeatedly accessed from China. Just to throw it out there, someone's going to have to explain to me why this is so shocking to everyone, or so, like, quote unquote bad or anything. This is just something I don't super understand. So Tejas and Brent, I'm going to have you take the lead on this one.
It's pretty simple. They told people that your data was safe, so everyone believed them for some crazy reason. I don't really know why, but that's kind of the gist of it. For years, TikTok has responded to data privacy concerns by promising information gathered about users in the United States is stored in the United States rather than China, where ByteDance, a video platform's parent company, is located. If anybody read that article and thought they were telling the truth, I don't know what to tell you. You probably got to get your eyes checked or something, but something's wrong with you in between the ears. And so, according to leaked audio from more than 80 internal TikTok meetings, China-based employees of ByteDance had repeatedly accessed non-public data about U.S. TikTok users, exactly the type of behavior that inspired former President Trump to threaten to ban the app. So, I mean, yeah, like there was talk last year about banning the app. I think we covered it a while ago. Ultimately, I think, it should have probably been banned, in my opinion. Just didn't really have the, I guess, maybe competence to actually pull it off last time around. And then this time around, nobody really seems to care about it and kind of just let it slide under the radar. And I think this Oracle deal is going to be their saving grace. But I mean, it's not really just about where you store your data. Obviously, a lot of information can get sent back that's like anonymized, right? Maybe the personal information is stored locally and anonymized or quote anonymized information is sent back to the main servers back home. And so, yeah, it shouldn't surprise anybody. I think it's great. I'm actually, the bigger surprise here is not just the TikTok tapes, but I guess I never really realized that BuzzFeed News was like actually decent news, because these guys have been putting out some decent articles. And I guess I got BuzzFeed confused with BuzzFeed News. And the news side is actually decent, and like the actual BuzzFeed side is like, the hot mess. So, I mean, they've put out a couple of good stories on privacy and tracking and general just topics and investigative things. And so, kudos to the BuzzFeed News team, not the actual BuzzFeed team. But yeah, that's the more surprising thing in the story than the actual employees getting caught on tape doing it. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't make a TikTok dance talking about how they saw this whole thing happening in real time.
Gotcha.
Are you going to get a subscription to BuzzFeed News now, or
no? Not at all.
Thought I'd ask. So, I mean, it feels like is this a big story only because it's China? Because I'm guessing there's probably a fair amount of looking at customer data going on at companies that are headquartered in the U.S. here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't hear a lot of outrage about that, but it feels like because China's involved, this is like a huge story. I don't know. I feel like there's probably a lot of data gazing going on, I'm not going to name any companies because I don't want anybody to sue me, but I'm just saying, just as a general blanket statement.
I'll name a company for you, Brent. So there was this, I think a while ago, Bezos was at a deposition in front of the House or Senate or one of these committee things. And they were asking him about, does Amazon use data that's used for their retail partners or people in the marketplace? So they use that data in any way? And I mean, his answer is obviously like the legal answer is like, we have a policy of not looking at it, but I can't tell you if that's actually the case or not. And so everybody who has a policy in place, yeah, sure, you got a policy, and then you break the policy. And if you ever get caught, you fire the person that broke the policy, you give them a little bit of a severance, call it a day. And it's probably, it'll cost you a little bit more than that Facebook fine, but not much more than, a real fine from the government. That would be, tens of millions of dollars. And so the whole thing's just kind of a game for, I think, most people. But yeah, I think most people just kind of get a sense of it because it is the China name, makes it sound a little bit worse. And I mean, I guess everybody should know that TikTok is, it's hard to win like the evil Olympics of social media companies, but TikTok is definitely up there in my opinion. And so it's good that any kind of, does that stop anybody from using it? Does that change people from signing up? Absolutely not. So will it really make a big difference? No. The only hope is that, now that this kind of gets publicized a little bit, maybe there are some regulations on social media companies. But Roger's kind of hinted about this a couple times in the past. I think earlier last season he did too. But I think this kind of because it's a cross-border issue, it's a little bit more about how in the future we're going to get to this kind of a lot more regionalized or even country level internets. And at the end of the day, you don't want like the U.S. companies screwing with U.S. Citizens is all fine and dandy because that's like our own people and whatever. That's just maybe American ingenuity. But like when someone else does it to you, then it's kind of bad. I saw like a lot of pushback. What do you call it? I guess not really on the political side of things, but like with this whole like Russia Ukraine situation, Facebook, Twitter, all these companies shut down in Russia because of, for no good reason. Like nobody told them they had to shut down. They just shut down. And so then the Russian people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't rely on these American people for like our software. We should need to build our own software. And other countries would see that too and be like, if we ever got into a sticky situation that these companies didn't agree with our point of view on, then we would lose that software. So that's kind of be one from like, I would say it's not really national security because I mean you don't really need social media, but we'll just call it what it is. Some countries might see it that way. So you'll start seeing a lot of more, I think, investment and kind of propping up of these kind of hyper localized versions of these softwares. Because why would you let Facebook and Google kind of dictate what happens in your country or the reaction? It's probably not very ideal. And so yeah, I think the whole thing is a lot more kind of geopolitical than privacy oriented, and that's kind of where the hype comes from. Because
Yep.
you know, even in the best case scenario, the data, they partner with Oracle, the data gets stored in America. Does that make TikTok still a good company? Absolutely not. You're still rotting people's brains and like manipulating them with your face prints and your voice prints and all sorts of stuff, hoarding all sorts of data. So like just because it's not going back to China doesn't make them a better company. Like they're equally bad on every ground. Just going back to China makes it gives some people like maybe some sense of like national unity or like American pride to like be like, oh, maybe it shouldn't go out there. But I don't think that really solves kind of the core issue at all.
What is your TikTok handle, Tejas? I want to make sure I catch all your videos.
Yeah, so it's LA Rams _ suck. There's no numbers at the end of it. That was the original username. So
Touche. That was very good. No, you hit it. Geopolitical, and because the biggest even economic competitor to the U.S. is China, and will be in the short term, and I don't know, maybe even long term. I think anything that can be used, to kind of offset or fight that is going to get a lot of news. It's going to get a lot of interest. But employees, whether they're in this country or not, are looking at your stuff. Basically, just know that. That's all I'm saying.
Just real quick, our loyal Bob is here and has this question. LA has a football team? ? And I got to say, why, yes. And we won the Super Bowl last year.
No, it's not has a football team there, Bob.
I don't know the Chargers won last year.
Yeah, silly.
I'm a big Chargers fan.
They don't have a football team. They have the football team in terms of the world champions there, Bob. Oh, and he's just kidding. We got you, Bob.
Well, Tejas, you mentioned briefly the TikTok solution to these privacy concerns was to team up with Oracle. So our last article for today is TikTok and Oracle teamed up after all, but concerns about data privacy remain. A report indicates China had access to US user data. So pretty similar to the last article that we just spoke about, but we have a quote from this that says, for more than a year, we've been working, we being TikTok, we've been working with Oracle on several measures as part of our commercial relationship to better safeguard our app. systems and the security of US user data. This is from the head of TikTok's US security and public policy. He says, today 100% of US user traffic is being routed to Oracle Cloud infrastructure, which that just sounds like a lot of red tape for TikTok employees. That's what I hear when I hear stuff like this, like things being siloed out, even if it's by country. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with you, Tejas. And with you, Brent, I think it's just when something has to do with China because they're like a competitor for our government, I feel like it kind of gets a little bit blown out of proportion when there are many other social media companies that are doing the same and or worse things.
Yeah. I mean, the data is being stored in the States under Oracle in their data centers does not change the privacy violations of TikTok as a company. I mean, the China thing is kind of like a cherry on top, but it's still fundamentally like very intrusive. It tracks a lot of what you do. It manipulates you with the AI. It does the face prints. It does the voice prints. It, has every semblance in a booming ad market, and the ad market is obviously a direct correlation to the amount of data they collect on you, your interests, your hobbies, everything like that. And so, yeah, there's still a massive violator. I'm not sure. I mean, it's kind of hard to make a social media site, I think, without being a privacy violator nowadays. But Facebook found a way to basically, or TikTok found a way to one up Facebook basically, and for that, I guess maybe you give a couple credit points, but not that great.
It's like what Raju said, that anytime something is like a free app or free to use, you're paying with something. It's just not with money.
Well, I mean, sometimes when you pay for Twitter Blue, you still get the ads too. So it's not always the case.
That's true.
Can we just say though? I mean, it's great that the U.S. traffic is staying in U.S. So that sounds good, but I mean, like you said, let's get back to the technical versus the ethical. So the technical is okay. You've technically made it so that the U.S. the TikTok traffic from U.S. Consumers is staying on U.S. soil. That's great. Does that mean that the data is not being seen by anybody in any country from that works with TikTok? I don't know. And what's being done with that data is only being done in the U.S. or is just because it's in the U.S. does that mean that the use of the data in the U.S. is ethical? No, it doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means that you've done a nice job routing the traffic to stay on U.S. soil.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty solid way to wrap it. Do we have anything else, or is that the end?
Speaking of being on U.S. soil, I will no longer be on U.S. soil in a couple of weeks. There's my last segue.
The segue right to the end.
Right to the end. So I just wanted to say thank you both, and also thank you to Raju, who's not here, for letting me work on this. I've learned so much. I've become so annoying in my friend group and have forwarded many an article. And also my mom is like definitely the viewer that we have on this show. She's not Bob though. This whole time I was like, Mom, are you Bob? And
do you know who Bob is?
So shout out to our number one fan.
Yeah, one day we'll bring Bob on. But yeah, I guess people who don't really know or pay attention, like Annika is the star behind the scenes on a lot of this, the scheduling, getting the articles in, finding out what's going to pop or not, picking out what the right quotes to talk about, kind of all the back end work, big on the social media, getting the people to like and subscribe, because I'm terrible at telling people to do that, engaging in conversations. And so there's a lot of, I would say, I think for most shows, a lot of times there's always people in the background. Oftentimes I don't really get to come on screen oftentimes and are the make or break of the show and kind of how things run smoothly. And so for that, I mean, we owe Annika a big thanks for just kind of keeping it running. I have a bad feeling about next week probably being a little on the chaotic side, but we'll find a way to make it work.
We're going to miss you. Absolutely. Best wishes. And by the way, Bob is saying for the record that he is not your mom. So
wow.
Thank you, Bob.
That proves that. Yeah, that's
heartbreaking. Okay, my final segue is, speaking of social media, please follow us on Twitter, Watch in Privacy, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that, I'll say thank you so much, Brent and Tejas. This has been an absolute pleasure. And we'll keep in touch for sure.
Absolutely.
And that's it, y'all.
All right. Adios.
See you when we see ya.